His desk is cold and hard against my back, a shocking contrast to the searing heat of his hands on my skin. The only light in the entire executive floor comes from the city skyline glittering far below through the wall of windows, painting his face in streaks of silver and shadow. My fingers are clutching the crisp white cotton of his shirt, gripping onto him like he's my only anchor in a dizzying electric storm. He whispers my name, and it sounds different here, in the dark, away from the fluorescent lights and the ringing phones. It's not the intern or Ava. It's a secret. A prayer. It's a sound that unravels me completely. His lips find the frantic pulse at the base of my throat, and a shudder runs through me so powerful I'm certain he can feel the entire world tilt on its axis. This is my boss, Alexander Thorne, the man whose voice commands boardrooms, whose signature is worth millions. And right now, that same hand is cupping my face with a tenderness that makes my chest ache, his thumb stroking my cheek as his other arm wraps around my waist, pulling me flush against him until there's not a sliver of space between us. The air smells like his expensive cologne and the faint, clean scent of starch from his shirt collar. It's the scent of power and control, and now it's mingling with my perfume, something sweet and nervous he once complimented me on in the elevator. His touch is deliberate, intense, mapping a territory that is strictly, utterly off-limits. Every graze of his lips, every brush of his fingertips is a lightning strike of pure sensation. I should stop this. I know I should. But the way he's looking at me, like he's been starving for this, for me, for longer than I ever dared to imagine, makes every rational thought dissolve into nothing. This is a line we can never, ever uncross. A forbidden secret we're writing in the dark of his office. And in this moment, I don't want to be anywhere else. But to understand how I got here, let me take you back. To understand how I ended up on my boss's desk after hours, you have to understand my life before that moment. It was normal. Predictable. I was Ava, the ambitious but slightly overwhelmed marketing intern at Thorne Industries. My world was a blur of coffee runs, spreadsheet tutorials, and trying to remember which of the 12 identical conference rooms was called the Innovation Hub. And at the center of that corporate universe was Alexander Thorne. Mr. Thorne wasn't just my boss. He was a legend. The youngest CEO in the company's history, a man who'd apparently built an empire before most people figure out their 401k. He was sharp, demanding, and terrifyingly brilliant. To me, he was less a person and more a force of nature, a very handsome, impeccably dressed force of nature who existed in a realm of private elevators and corner offices. My interactions with him were minimal, mostly consisting of me nervously handing him reports while trying not to spill my latte on my blouse. He was always polite, always professional, but there was a distance there. A wall. He was the sun, and I was just a distant planet, dutifully orbiting in my little cubicle. My days were a cycle of early mornings and late nights, fueled by ambition and cheap instant noodles. I shared a cramped apartment with my best friend, Chloe, and our biggest excitement was usually finding a new show to binge. My love life was non-existent. I'd convinced myself I was married to my career, that this internship was my one shot at something great. But sometimes I'd catch a glimpse of something else. Like the time I saw him late one evening, still at his desk, his tie loosened and his hair slightly messy as he stared out at the city lights. He looked less like a corporate titan and more like a man. A tired, maybe even lonely man. I remember scurrying past his open door, my heart doing a weird little flip-flop that I immediately dismissed. It was just a silly crush, I told myself. A classic case of a young intern being impressed by power and a well-tailored suit. It was harmless. It had to be. Because the idea that Alexander Thorne, the man who could have anyone, would ever see me, really see me, was nothing more than a fantasy I'd never, ever dare to speak out loud. Our worlds were too far apart. The rules were too clear. He was the boss. I was the intern. And that was a line that was never, ever crossed. Or so I thought. The first real crack in that professional wall happened, so subtly I almost convinced myself I'd imagined it. It was a Wednesday, I think. The air conditioning was broken on our floor, making the office feel stuffy and tense. I was delivering a revised presentation deck to Mr. Thorne's office, my palms slightly damp from the heat and nerves. His door was ajar. I knocked softly and heard his low, "Come in." He was on the phone, his back to me, gesturing at something on his screen. I placed the folder neatly on the corner of his massive oak desk, the way his assistant had taught me, and turned to leave. "Hold on," his voice stopped me, his hand briefly covering the phone's receiver. He wasn't looking at me, his focus still on his call, but he pointed to a bottle of water sitting beside his laptop. "Ava, could you?" My hand stuck. It was such a small thing. So trivial. But he'd remembered my name. He didn't say intern or miss. He said Ava. My heart did a little stutter step. I moved quickly, my fingers fumbling as I twisted the cap off the cool glass bottle and handed it to him. His fingers brushed against mine as he took it. It was the briefest, most accidental contact. Static electricity or just skin on skin. But a jolt, sharp and undeniable, shot straight up my arm. I froze. His eyes, which had been fixed on his monitor, flickered down to where our hands had almost touched, then up to my face. For a fraction of a second, his professional mask seemed to slip. I saw something flash in his gaze. Surprise, maybe, or recognition. A shared acknowledgement of that tiny electric spark. He took a swift drink, never breaking his phone conversation, and gave me a curt nod of thanks. I practically fled the office, my skin buzzing. After that, I started noticing things. The way he'd sometimes pause by my cubicle to ask a question about a project, his tall frame seeming to block out the fluorescent light. The way his gaze would linger on me for a half-second too long during Monday morning meetings, making it impossible to concentrate on the quarterly reports. Once in the break room, I was struggling to reach a cup on the high shelf. I felt a presence behind me, and then an arm reached over my shoulder, easily retrieving it. He was so close I could feel the warmth radiating from his body, could smell the clean, crisp scent of his soap mingling with his cologne. "Allow me," he said, his voice a low murmur right by my ear. He handed me the cup, our fingers brushing again, and this time it didn't feel accidental. It felt deliberate. My cheeks flushed a deep, embarrassing crimson. "Thank you, Mr. Thorne," I stammered, unable to meet his eyes. "Alexander," he corrected softly, and then he was gone, leaving me standing there, my heart hammering against my ribs, holding a stupid paper cup and wondering if I'd just hallucinated the entire encounter. The butterflies in my stomach were no longer just butterflies. They were a full-scale rebellion. Every glance felt loaded. Every casual interaction felt like a secret message. I was living in a state of delicious, terrifying anticipation, constantly wondering, was it all in my head? Or was the impossible, the forbidden, slowly becoming possible? The turning point came on a night I was sure would be the death of me. It was the evening before the biggest client presentation of the quarter. The entire marketing team had been working themselves into the ground, but Mr. Thorne, Alexander, had asked me to stay late to help him finalize the financial projections. Just the two of us. My stomach was a tangled knot of nerves and a thrill I desperately tried to suppress. "It's professional," I chanted to myself. "He needs your help with the numbers. That's all." For hours, we worked in a focused silence in his office, the only sounds the soft click of keyboards and the distant hum of the cleaning staff. The sun set, painting the skyline in shades of deep orange and purple, and eventually, the office fell completely silent. We were the only two people left on the entire executive floor. It was past 10 when we finally finished. I leaned back in my chair, exhaling a long breath of relief. "I think that's everything," I said, my voice sounding too loud in the quiet room. "It is. Thank you, Ava. Your attention to detail is exceptional," he said, not looking at his screen, but directly at me. The praise, delivered in his low, quiet voice in the near dark, felt more intimate than it should have. He stood up to walk me out. We stepped into the hallway, and he pressed the button for the elevator. We waited in a silence that felt heavy, charged. The lights in the hallway were dimmed for the night. The elevator dinged, the doors slid open, and nothing happened. The car was dark, utterly dead. He pressed the button again. Nothing. A frown etched his features. He pulled out his phone, then sighed. No signal up here. The landline in my office. We walked back, and he picked up the phone on his desk. His expression tightened. It's dead. The storm must have knocked out the power to the banks. The backup generator only covers essential systems. He glanced out the window at the lashing rain that had begun to fall, a storm we'd been too engrossed to notice. We're stuck, I asked, my voice barely a whisper. It appears the security lockdown has engaged with the power outage. The stairs will be sealed. He ran a hand through his hair, a rare gesture of frustration. I'm so sorry, Ava. I'll get security on the building manager's line. It might take a little while. A little while turned into an hour. We were trapped. Truly, utterly trapped. Alone. The professional facade began to crumble under the bizarre intimacy of the situation. We moved from his desk to the small sitting area in his office, the plush sofa feeling like a life raft in a dark, silent sea. We started talking. Not about work. About everything else. Where we grew up. What we wanted from life. I told him about my dream of starting my own agency one day, and he didn't laugh. He listened intently. He told me about his first failed business, a story I knew he never shared. The city lights glimmered below, our only witnesses. The tension wasn't nervous anymore. It was something else. Something deep and magnetic. We were leaning towards each other, drawn by an invisible force. The air between us crackled with everything we weren't saying. Then his phone, which had been searching for a signal, suddenly lit up with a delayed flurry of messages. The spell broke, but only for a second. He looked at the screen. Security. They're coming up to manually override the system. They'll be about 15 minutes. 15 minutes. A lifetime. A heartbeat. He looked from his phone to me, and the world shrunk to that single moment. The professional distance was gone, burned away by the shared confessions and the charged silence of the storm. The question hanging in the air between us was no longer if, but what now? We were finally, undeniably, unable to ignore the pull any longer. The notification of our impending rescue didn't break the tension. It supercharged it. We had 15 minutes. A finite, terrifying, exhilarating window of time. The air in the office felt thick enough to drink, every breath a conscious effort. He didn't move from the sofa. He just looked at me, his eyes dark and unreadable in the city's glow. The hum of the returned power was a distant buzz, but the silence between us was louder. Ava, he said, and my name was a caress, a question, and an answer all at once. I don't know which of us moved first. Maybe we both did, drawn together by a gravity too powerful to resist. One moment there was space between us on the sofa. The next, his hand was cupping my jaw, his thumb stroking my cheek with a reverence that made my eyes flutter shut. And then his lips were on mine. It wasn't gentle or questioning. It was a release. A dam breaking after months of pent-up longing and stolen glances. It was hunger and heat and a shocking, desperate tenderness. His kiss was confident, deep, and it tasted of coffee and the mint he always favored and something uniquely, intoxicatingly him. A soft, broken sound escaped me, and he swallowed it, his arms wrapping around me, pulling me onto his lap until I was straddling him. My hands slid into his perfectly styled hair, messing it, claiming him. This was Alexander Thorne, the untouchable CEO, and he was kissing me like I was the only source of oxygen in the room. He broke the kiss, both of us gasping for air, our foreheads pressed together. His breathing was as ragged as mine. I've wanted to do that, he whispered, his voice rough with emotion, for a very, very long time. Before I could even process that, he stood, lifting me with him as if I weighed nothing. In a few strides, he'd carried me to his massive, imposing desk. He swept a stack of folders aside with his arm, the sound of scattering paper shockingly loud, and then he was setting me down on the cool, polished surface. The world narrowed to this. The hard edge of the desk against my thighs. The glittering map of the city spread out behind him. The intoxicating scent of his cologne mingling with my own nervous excitement. His hands, which I'd only ever seen sign million-dollar contracts or point to charts, were now exploring the line of my neck, the slope of my shoulder, slipping under the edge of my blouse to find the bare skin of my waist. Every touch was deliberate, intense, setting a fire that raced through my veins. He was learning me, memorizing me with a focus I'd only ever seen him give his work. His lips followed the path his hands had blazed, trailing hot, open-mouthed kisses down my throat, murmuring words against my skin that I felt more than heard. How beautiful I was, how he'd thought about this, how I'd driven him quietly insane for months. It was overwhelming. It was not enough. It was a symphony of sensation. The cool air on my skin, the heat of his mouth, the rough texture of his wool suit trousers against my bare legs, the soft, desperate sounds we were both making. This was no longer a fantasy. This was real. He was real. The way he looked at me, with a raw, unguarded need I never knew he possessed, shattered the last of my reservations. We were crossing every line, breaking every rule, right there on his desk, with the whole city watching. And in that moment, I didn't care about the consequences. I only cared about him. The sharp buzz of the intercom on his desk was like a bucket of ice water. We froze, our ragged breathing the only sound in the sudden, stark silence. His forehead was still resting against mine, his body tense. The spell wasn't broken, but it was violently cracked. His voice, when he answered, was impressively steady, though I could feel the frantic beat of his heart against my chest. "Thorne." A staticky voice echoed in the room. "Mr. Thorne, security here. The system's back online. The elevator is operational. We're all clear." "Thank you," he said, his eyes locked on mine. He released the button. For a long moment, neither of us moved. The real world was crashing back in, and with it, a tidal wave of reality. What had we done? He was my boss. I was his intern. This was a fireable offense, a scandal waiting to happen. Gently, he helped me off the desk. My legs were unsteady. We didn't speak as we straightened our clothes, a silent, surreal dance of smoothing wrinkled fabric and avoiding each other's eyes. The air, once charged with passion, was now thick with unspoken questions and a heavy, terrifying awareness. He walked me to the elevator, his hand a ghost of a touch on the small of my back. The doors slid open. He looked at me, his professional mask almost perfectly back in place, but I could see the storm still raging in his eyes. "Ava," he began, his voice low. "We don't have to," I whispered, unable to let him finish the sentence to hear the regret. "It was the storm. The stress. We can just forget it happened." He searched my face, and for a heartbreaking second, I thought he would agree. That this would be our beautiful, forbidden secret, locked away forever. But then he shook his head, just once, a firm, decisive movement. "I don't want to forget," he said, his voice firm. The CEO was back, but his words were anything but professional. "I can't." The elevator doors started to close, and I stepped back, my mind reeling. The last thing I saw was his intense, unwavering gaze before the doors shut, separating us. The next few days were agony. The office was back to normal, buzzing with post-presentation success. He was back to being Mr. Thorne, polite, focused, and distant. The distance was a special kind of torture. Had he changed his mind? Had it truly been a moment of madness? Then, on Friday afternoon, an email appeared in my inbox. The subject line was blank. The body contained only a time and an address for a restaurant, so exclusive I'd only read about it in magazines. And a single line. "This has nothing to do with your employment." This has everything to do with me wanting to take you to dinner. If you want to. Alexander. I stared at the screen, my heart hammering. It wasn't an end. It was a beginning. A complicated, risky, terrifyingly beautiful beginning. The memory of that night was no longer a secret shame. It was a promise. A line had been crossed, and instead of retreating, he was asking me to walk forward with him. And I knew with every fiber of my being that I would say yes. That was the night my entire world shifted on its axis. It's a risk, I know. It's complicated and messy and against every rule in the book. But some chances, some moments are so electric, so utterly unforgettable, that you just have to close your eyes and jump. It makes me wonder, have you ever taken a risk on a feeling that terrified and thrilled you in equal measure? A moment you knew could change everything? Please let me know in the comments below. I'd love to hear your story.